Welcome everybody to the Pathfinder class guide. In this short video, I'll go over every single class and their subclasses, so that's kind of a lot. I'll also note out which class share a class basically with the companions you will be getting. And I'll let you know, of course, which ones are better for the newcomers to the series, as this game is going to be insanely good, therefore probably very popular, and a lot of you might not have had a chance to experience the Pathfinder. If you don't know what Pathfinder is about, I recommend looking up my guide online. I have a 1-hour guide that delves on the details of the game. The little nitpicky things that you just need to know before starting, so I invite you to see that. Also, before starting, I'll be streaming tomorrow the game on YouTube and Twitch, on this channel and the same name on Twitch. Without further ado, let's get into it. The first class we're gonna get into is the Alchemist. The Alchemist basically use bombs and potions to get themselves powers or to exterminate foes. They are kind of difficult to play, and they are more of a supporty roles, but they are very fun to play. A really good one of those is the Vivisectionist, which removes bomb but adds sneak attack. This is a really good one-of dip if you ever feel like it. The Chirurgeon is going to try to heal his allies. The Grenadier will mostly use bombs, it won't use potions as much. Incense Synthesizer will transfer your potions into Fog. Fog is useful because it can help a lot of people at once. Metamorph will focus on the body and how it can be mutated. And Persevationist are going to bottle up specimens and throw them at people in a funny enough way. On to the Arcanist. The Arcanist are a weird mix of wizard and sorcerer. In that sense, they have a spell book, most of them, as the wizard, and they can learn spells from scrolls. The problem is, they also cast like sorcerer, so you can prepare spells, and you also get the benefit of innate spellcasting. The real problem in all of this is simply that the advantage of a wizard is that they do get spells a level earlier than the sorcerer, and this falls into the sorcerer's category, where they do not surpass the wizard in which spell they know first. So if you want to use a lot of small spells, you'll be able to do so with the Sorcerer and the Arcanist. But if you just want a few big spells that you'll know in advance, I recommend the Wizard, but that is for later. Another thing with the Arcanist is that they have something called Arcanist Exploits, which you can see at the bottom here. Basically, they save points to their arcane reservoir that they can use every day, and then they can use this to either empower their spells that they cast normally, or use Arcanist Exploits which are different buffs that you'll use. Some are attacks, some are buffs, some are disadvantages on the enemy. They basically do a lot of things. They're like overpowered cantrip that you need points to cast, essentially. Some of their subclass include the Brownford Transmuter, basically just transmute object, Eldritch Font, Bubbling with Power. So they just they can cast spell as a font of power, right? So they have this here. An Eldritch Font gains 1 additional spell slot for each level of Arcanist spell she can cast. However, the number of spell of each level that they prepare is reduced by 1. So you know more spells, but you can cast less. Um, White Mage is gonna have some heals. Unlettered Arcanist is gonna lose the spell book, but they're gonna get witch spells. It kind of defeats the purpose of being an Arcanist, but it can be good. Nature Mage is basically turning you into a Druid, and so on and so forth. So, the Barbarian. The Barbarian is one of those classes that I recommend for new players. They rage and they do a lot of damage. It's as simple as that. They are very tanky without the need of much magical armor, so you'll save a lot of money, and they are extremely sturdy. Some subclasses get a lot of armor, like the armor proficiencies, but most of them don't. I won't go through all of their subclasses. I'll just say that the Mad Dog is insane because animal companions are really good. So if you want a Berserker that's gonna have a dog with him and you just can beat everything down, this is the class for you. The Bard. The Bard is a buff. In the last game, you had a Bard by default. Now you don't, sadly. This means the Bard is really useful. Do you want them as your main character? That is entirely up to you. But you can basically become a jack of all trades, depending on which subclass you choose. This is really good, and you'll be able to buff your party and hinder the enemies. They're basically always going to be good no matter what party you choose or anything else, basically. But they are solely focused on the supporting role. But if you feel like being the support of your own team, by all means, choose the Bard. It says they're somewhat difficult. That's not really true. I'm sure you can make your way through the Bards list. Probably just use the normal Bard, and you'll do just fine. The Blood Ragers is basically a magical Barbarian. They are new to this game, so I'm not sure how good they are, but apparently they are insanely strong. So I recommend giving them a shot if you think the Barbarian is just a bit too lame, but the archetype truly interests you. Basically, you'll move fast and you will get all the unarmored proficiencies the Barbarian gets, but with more magic involved. Cavalier, look, I won't get too much into it. You get a pet that you can ride into battle after a certain level. The pet has to be large, I believe, but Cavalier it's its own archetype, you know? You have fighters, and then you have fighters that are on horses. Obviously, any class can ride in this game, but those have special talents to ride and everything. It's pretty fun. It's not my cup of tea, but if you want a fighter and you really want, let's say, a beast rider, that's great. You'll get to ride dinosaurs into battle, and honestly, that's the dream of many people, I'm sure. Cleric is so in 5e, if you've ever heard of D&D and everything, clerics are kind of jack of all trades. They can do literally anything and everything depending on how you build them. This is kind of the same. Clerics are very good, but they are only the divine casters, you know. They basically separated the different phases of the cleric, and we'll get into it later. Essentially, the cleric smites their foes and heals their friends, and you can dive more one way or another. You'll see here the armor proficiencies with heavy armor, or here Blessing of the Faithful, or Domain Masteries. You'll get proficiencies with light weapons, but you can't wear any armor as if you're an Eclipse Surge. The Druids are essentially either you control nature or you wild shape into great animals, and depending on which archetype you pick, you'll lean one side or the other more. So let's say the Blight Druid, you control nature and light. Defender of the true world, you make your enemy the Fae. but you lose your summons. The Drovier, I'm not entirely sure, but I feel like you just become a divine caster. Elemental Rampager is the big raw I transform into animal, as well as the Primal Druid, and the Face Speaker is more of the caster type. I recommend the Druid if it's a class that speaks to you. It's kind of hard to play sometimes, and you kind of need to stick to one thing and one thing only, but if that's what you feel like doing, by all means, you get Wild Shape, you get Spontaneous Summoning, and Nature Bond. You get all the animals you want, and you can turn into an animal. So that's pretty neat. The Fighter, obviously here, obvious choice for new beginner. You are a master of all weapons, and you decide how to fight. There are a few subclasses, like the Tower Shield Specialist if you want to be a great tank, the Two-Hand Fighter if you want just to bash people in the head, but essentially all fighters are gonna do pretty much the same thing. They're gonna be attacking a lot, running into the enemy or with their bow, and they are going to be great at it, really hard to kill, definitely a must-have, and you will love to be a fighter basically at any point of the game. The Hunter gets Animal Companion, and basically is just it's just a fighter with a bow, but a lot of Animal Companion thing. I'm not gonna dive in too much into it because I feel like anything the Hunter does, the Ranger is better at, but that's if you just really like animal and you want a bow, I feel like the Hunter could be for you. The Inquisitor, it's the more damage-oriented aspect of the Cleric from 5e. They have stuff like Bane Weapon and Judgments. Now, they have a few things like a Sacred Huntsmaster that gets a Animal Companion, that's great, Monster Tactician that can summon monsters at will, but essentially they're just there to smite people for their god. Kineticist. This one is a weird one. It doesn't act like any other class in Pathfinder, I feel, where it has its own mechanic that are very weird. But if you want to learn it, go for it. I just don't recommend it for everybody. Their main thing is going to be a Kinetic Blast. You get to choose elements that you control, and you just hurl those elements at people. And further down the line with levels, you get to mix those elements. Like if you control fire and water, you'll be able to throw fire and water and also steam at people. It's great flavor, great flavor, really strong also. Some of the unfair solo build were mostly Kineticist, where you place a wall before the enemy of water that would push them back. And then there was this spell called Deadly Earth that would just deal insane amount of damage, so everybody would be stuck in it because of the wall. That's basically what was happening. So if you want a really good class that does a lot of damage and you really like the elements, go for it. But keep in mind the difficulty is rated really high because they are, first off, they only do damage, and secondly, they act like no other class from Pathfinder. But if you're a newcomer, that's kind of better for you, right? Because you don't know anything about it anyways. So I recommend it. There's no companion that's a Kineticist. In the last game there was one. So if you want to pick them up, go for it. As you can see, they are 100% range combat, no support, no healing, no armor, no melee, and no control. So be careful when you do that. The Magus is basically a guy with a sword but also casts spell, and it says it's difficult, but I actually recommend this guy if you are a newcomer and you like to read. You need to read upon the class, but it is insanely fun. Stuff like Eldritch Scion and Sword Saint just are really good to play, and they're really fun. You'll never be hit, and you'll deal insane amount of damage. Their main thing is spell combat. They can cast spell the same round as a weapon attack. This is insane if you think about it, because you can make a touch spell and an attack, which deals insane amount of attack. You can also charge your weapon with a spell that requires a touch attack. So this is really strong. The monk, everybody's favorite dip, the scaled fist dip in everything, the AC bonus from your charisma for every charisma class, you'll see it. Monks are actually pretty good. I do recommend them. They are a melee fighter. I know a lot of people like the monk, and honestly, as a pure single class, monk is insane. I won't say too much about it. You guys know what a monk is. The subclasses don't really change much. There's an archer is an archer. The one thing that's weird is that they did a first iteration of the monk, which is the traditional monk, that was not as good as the monk they released. So now the traditional monk is a subclass if you want the true feeling, but the monk is better, I believe, or it might be the other way around. A small Google search will tell you. The Oracle, it's again a bit of the Inquisitor feeling, but more towards damage elements and fun like that. They support a lot and they cast a lot of magic. They have a bit of control, but basically that's that. The Paladin. Everybody loves Paladin. You smite evil. In 5e, Paladins can be pretty much anything. Evil and everything. In this game, you're forced into certain lawful alignment. I believe most of the Paladins are forced into lawful good. So if you don't vibe with that, sadly, it's Inquisitor for you or something else. But if you do vibe with that, the Paladin will be great for you. This is a demon-focused campaign. Therefore, Paladin cannot be bad. The Ranger. I feel like the Ranger is probably the best class for newcomers to start with. Favored enemy can be basically demons. You choose a type of enemy and then you get damage against them. The last game was Fae focused, and you could choose Fae or humans as your favorite enemies. In this game, you'll probably pick demons or humans depending on what you prefer. You get Ranger's Bond, so you can have animal companions and stuff. And yeah, that's pretty much it. The Rogue. The Rogue difficulty is low, and they do recommend it at first. But I feel like some stuff, like the Slayer, might be more flavorful, let's say. Nonetheless, the Rogue is pretty good. The Knife Master was like insanely strong in the last game. So if you like just like knifey boys, there you go. They get sneak attack essentially, and that's pretty much everything. The Shaman is essentially a Cleric, but with the spirits, not the gods. They get X's, which is a... I don't think it was added in the first game. It's basically you get a few X's. It's like the Arcane Exploits from the Arcanist. They're either bonuses to yourself or diminutive effect, status effect for the enemies. This Scald is a battle bard. You basically rage and you inspire rage. It's basically if you wanted to be a bard but you felt like you lacked some battle punch and you didn't want your guy to be only a performer, now you can be a angry performer. They do get a few subclasses. I don't know much about them, but they have pretty cool name like Hunt Caller or Demon Dancer. That's kind of intense. The Slayer is a class I would recommend for the newcomers. The Slayer gets sneak attack and studied target, and essentially you are a glass cannon. You deal an insane amount of damage, be it ranged or melee, but you are also very weak. You won't survive many attacks, so hence why I recommend ranged. But you know, you do you. I do feel like the Slayer is insanely strong. The Sorcerer, now, is probably the class I'd recommend the most. It says it's difficult. I don't think it's that difficult. Sorcerers gain spells every level. They cannot craft them from scrolls or add them to their spellbook because they don't have spellbook. But they do get a lot of uses out of those spells. Like the Arcanist, they are one level behind the Wizard in terms of spells, but they're still incredibly strong. And one of the best class in the last game was the Sylvan Sorcerer. Why? Because they had Animal Companion, and Animal Companions are insane, because for the first part of the game, you can buff them and they're basically another ally. But the further down you go, you can literally polymorph them into dragons once you get that spell, which is insane. They do have nine-tail hair, which is a really funny thing, and you get basically you get new tails every time every 2 level, and those tails just gives you more and more spells as you can go. The War Priest is what I would call the Paladin version of the Cleric. Like in 5e, Cleric can do pretty much anything, they're just in different class. This gives you a lot of melee power damage, some casting, and some support. Now, you can, if you don't like the god and everything, you can be a cult leader, a feral champion, they have it all. They have it all, and it's pretty fun. The Witch is what the Warlock was in 5e. You get X's, a patron, and familiars. This is insanely good. I believe Elemental Witch is really great, and that's about it. You cast spells of different element. You don't have that many of them, and they're not that high level. The Witch has its own spell list, but you are essentially the closest thing to a Warlock that you could be in 5e. So if you want to be an agent of the Shadow or of some stronger being or presence on the world, the Witch is great. And finally, keeping the best for the last, the Wizard. Do I recommend the Wizard for newcomers? No, I don't. I recommend Sorcerer if you want to be a Wizard. But Wizards do have their few things that's good. You can use spell from scrolls to add to your spellbook permanently, which are a lot in this game. And you can cast them quite often. You can actually decide how many times a day you can cast each. You have a few spells that you can cast each day, and you can decide which ones are which. This is called a prepared caster, and it is very strong, but you have less spell than the Sorcerer. So you have less room for errors, and I feel like the Sorcerer just is stronger in general. Now let's... So, for the companions, you're gonna get a monk Zen archer, a human paladin, a half-elf shaman, which is gonna be a spirit hunter, a witch, that's gonna be a stigmatized witch, I assume, an oracle, a hell knight. So I don't really remember where those are. Oh, they're all the way over there. Okay, because you need like a lot of things before you become a hell knight, so they might join in later. You'll get a cleric if you can get through there. A rogue, like I said. A ranger succubus, which is sure to be fun to have around. And for some reason, oh, the ranger was right there. A slayer, which is gonna be a glass cannon. and a wizard, finally. Now, what does this mean? You have a lot of options, a lot of companions. The one thing I notice is that you don't have a lot of frontliners. So you might want to do a melee that can double as a tank if you're worried about that. But besides that, they offer you a lot of choice and a lot of companion, so I don't think you are in too much trouble. They do offer a lot of ranged characters though, so yeah, that is basically what I had to say. This video was made really quick, and I'm sorry for the lack of quality, but I just wanted to get it out there before going to work. I'll see you guys soon, where I create my character tomorrow, and I'll take you on my journey of my wizard Lich. Have a good one.